Today, because of technology allows us to fail early, right? Experiment and fail early, right? Most likely was not there earlier, that we could not fail early. Right. And when you asked me this question, what you would have done if these were available, we would have failed early, right? Instead of failing after a year of development and figuring out, oh my God, this is not something which is getting us right.
Hey guys, happy to have you on another session of Bold and Bay. Today we have someone real exciting who went on to being a scientist, then engineer, and now a global tech leader. Uh, his career spans from being a scientist with aeronautical development establishment, followed by which he went on to being an engineer in multiple organizations. Then he was the senior director of engineering at Oracle, and then he went on to work with Mitra Tech. And currently, he is the senior VP of global engineering at IBS Global. Thank you so much for coming on the session, sir.
Thank you, Tony. Pleasure to be here.
So, to start off, I think I'm a little curious about what took you from being a scientist at the aeronautical development establishment to becoming a software engineer. So, what was that thing that took you from here to there?
Yeah, so Tony, first of all, pleasure to be here. Thanks for providing me this opportunity and talking to you today. The first one, I started my career as a scientist in DRDO, right? That was my first job of college. I studied from NIT Raipur, and those days, mid-90s, frankly, getting a job was very difficult because there were not too many opportunities even during those times. There was very limited campus placement. This happened to be a government job. There was an open competition and there were people who were picked up across India and who were put for a year in Pune for training in a fantastic location, Khadakwasla, and we went through a year training to basically learn a lot of skills which are required in defense sector. So then I came to Bangalore. I was posted to Bangalore. All of us who were part of batch of 35 were actually distributed across India. I happened to join ADE, a nautical development establishment, started working on aviation's related software development, embedded systems, building software for UAVs, which were very, very niche at that time, which are modern drones today. But during those times, it was very, very niche, very, very advanced. And this is like more than 25 years back we are talking about, wherein UAVs were in infancy. So I happened to basically write software for embedded systems, for computers running on board and collecting data from a lot of sensors and actuators and sending that to the ground control systems. It was very exciting, undoubtedly, a lot of learning. I think what took me to take a plunge into commercial software development is, I think, the speed. I was hungry to do more. And definitely at that age, I was eager to make fast changes and make changes quickly, correct? Government has its own pace of doing things and executing on projects. And I could quickly realize that I really wanted to move at a speed, and I wanted, much more dynamic work environment to operate, right? While DRDO has been fantastic if you want to build very long-term career and stay in that organization for long, and it has done marvelous over the last couple of decades. But at the same time, commercial software development, corporate sector has its own challenges, but at the same time has its own velocity with which it moves. That's what was catching on to me. So that's what took me to the role for software engineer. I was more working close to hardware when I was in DRDO, building, writing in embedded C and during that time some real-time operating system and whatnot, which is pretty old these days.
So looking back, what did you do early that compounded over decades?
I think the focus on learning, right, was clearly the focus in early stages. Learn as much possible, go deep, get fundamentals strong. That was, I think, the focus. I also knew that I realized at that time Java had just started to come in as a programming language. Sun had invented, Java, and then Java was just taking shape. And I was actually a C programmer. So, but Java was actually close to C, interestingly. But then there was always this lure of, hey, let's there were a lot of C++ programmers, Visual C++ programmers at that time. And when I was actually also started coding on C++, did decent amount of that. But when I embraced Java, I embraced it fully. So my approach was like, just learn this and master it as much possible in your, during your work hours and sometimes outside, even during weekends, for example, to learn and get the fundamentals strong instead of going too much wide, because any programming language and infrastructures and frameworks around it are so wide in software engineering that you tend to really get lost. But instead of going too wide, like for example, I started working a lot on the UI side in early days, right? And I said, I want to master the UI, right? User interfaces and things like that. Then slowly, gradually, then I started moving to backend systems, building, the database interactions, middle tier applications and backend systems on that. And eventually started building the end-to-end systems, right, from all the way from UI to backends to the databases, schema designs, and things like that. So, which was typically at that time the 3-tier architectures were still becoming popular, and at that time they were like fat client applications. The web was still very new, but my idea was to really focus on fundamentals, understand what is behind a little bit, right, and behind a lot of these frameworks, and as much try to go deep and stay focused, right? And loads of hard work, I must say, right? Instead of too much of distraction that, hey, this is something now cool, right? Let's try to do this. Hey, this is something which is flavor of the year, right? Or flavor of the month, right? Let's try to do this, right? Versus like just have that conviction. And I would suggest that I also was lucky that I had good, colleagues who were actually also learning along with me. And there were a few seniors who also helped mentor and guide during this process and were able to course correct when you would go and ask them, hey, is this the right thing to do? What do you think about it, etc. So I think the focus, I would say, a disciplined way of learning and going deeper and really digging into the fundamentals, Tony. Yeah.
So when did you actually realize that coding alone isn't going to take me further? When was it, sir?
I think it was more less of the realization on my part to say that I want to start leading. I think it was more also from my organization. Perhaps they saw that they provided that opportunity to me, right? I had a team of very smart people. I mean, even that time I was working with people who had graduated from BITS Pilani. There were a few people from IIT Roorkee, for example. Very good pedigree of people whom I was working with, and very passionate set of individuals, really young. All of us were very young, very, very dedicated to their work. No shortcuts, etc. But I think one is like, yes, clearly there was an interest on my side that I wanted to start leading and start emerging and start managing teams, leading teams. But second is my organization and my manager also perhaps saw this various activities which were given to me, which were like largely team based. For example, it could be, we used to have like very separate, developers, QA, infrastructure, IT teams, right? And that's how the software would be built, product managers. I think there were perhaps the opportunities wherein I would love to actually interact with the cross functions of people, and I would love to actually participate in discussions which were beyond just my day-to-day work and my other developers. I would love to interact with my product managers, love to talk to QA folks, love to talk to infrastructure guys. That time DevOps was not even a term, correct? Would love to talk to operations guys and just try to, and so then automatically some tasks started to be given to me by my manager, which required cross-team coordinations and looking at things a little bit more holistically, and I always enjoyed that. So maybe that was the thing. Then I realized, okay, this is something which then I was said, hey, this is an opportunity. Would you take it? And I said, why not? Absolutely, right. And that was, I think it was both ways. One is I started unknowingly demonstrating that I was interested. And second is, I think my leadership found that perhaps skill or ability for me to do this, right?
Right.
To lead the teams.
What are other such similar characteristics that you think hampers the from an engineer to becoming a leader, right? What other characteristics in them that hampers it, or what things should they focus on to get to a leader?
So there are a couple of things there, and I think there's no right and wrong answer there because everybody has their own style. And being an engineer and continue to be an engineer, individual contributor is fantastic thing for somebody to build their career, right? They absolutely can be an architects, distinguished engineers as they grow and look at system-wide problems to be solved, or they can go really deep and build frameworks, right? And, can be developer all their life. So there is absolutely, great thing to be an engineer, right? That's what I believe, right? Leadership is a slightly different ball game when it comes to it because you get to start depending a lot on others and you start owning work which when you are directly not doing that work. Correct. So I think what I feel at times, one is like a couple of things which one need to be careful of. See, if you want to be really an engineer and you want to basically continue, you should start making that choices, after a couple of years in your career. Correct. It doesn't come immediately, let's say, but I think you should be clear after maybe 7-8 years that this is what something I want to go, right? Should I pick, because the reality is being a manager, and then further being a leader, takes you on a very, very different thought process versus being an individual contributor, correct? So that choice one should make. But then at that time, when you're making that choice, you also should be very self-aware that what you can and what you cannot do, frankly. And I think for me, I was self-aware. Right? I knew that, perhaps I felt that maybe, I could be a good manager, but I also somehow felt that could I be as successful as an engineer, correct? And my interests, right, at the same time. So one is that. Second is, I feel maybe some of the common mistakes, which even there is a lot of pull to explore a lot of different things at that time, especially tech landscape has been wide and it is much wider now. And it used to be wider even, 2 decades back. Right. There is always a lot happening in tech. There is always new framework, new things, new languages, new ways of doing things, new thinking, like structural to object-oriented to functional, right? Everything, right, is like the paradigm shift are so common, correct? So I think the distraction is one should avoid as much possible. Therefore, a focused approach on doing what they're doing is extremely important. So that is one. Second thing is, I think soon as you actually start working, I would say when you are perhaps 7-8 years in industry, maybe 10 years, you start to realize it's very interesting that you cannot solve a problem alone.
True.
You start to realize that you need somebody else along with you or set of people who can actually solve a problem, because the problem size grows bigger as you also grow. So as you grow, the problem which is given to you is also bigger, and problem size grows. Then how do you make sure that you are able to collaborate? Right. How you are able to contribute to a solution working with other individuals. Correct? Yeah. And that's where the whole point of teamwork, being able to collaborate well, despite, what level those people are. Correct? And I would even say, Tony, I would use this word that keep your ego aside at that point in time, because you are also becoming an expert. So you may tend to think as an individual that why should I reach out to somebody, right? Somebody else should reach out to me, correct? And I know it all. So why should I actually even talk to anyone, right? Hey, let the documents do the talking, emails do the talking, chat messages do the talking, and I'll only contribute in the meeting. I felt that being open is actually a better thing than working in the silo. Nice. And what I meant by that is like being open and being able to reach out to people and ready to share is actually more powerful than ready to contain that knowledge within. And I see a lot even today wherein people don't like to share because they think, hey, somebody else is going to learn what I've learned over the years, right? So why should I give? But I think giving is always much more powerful, because by giving, you are basically freeing yourself to do more And then, there is like, sometimes it happens like people take credit of your work, etc. Right? That happens, but then, you would do something even more bigger,
Definitely.
right? So I think that's what is important. So I think a couple of things, like people are actually, they lose focus because they jump around. Either it could be focus, also jumping jobs, like every 2 years. For me, I quit my first job in 3 years about it. Yeah, but that was a very different, perhaps, way of looking at government to a big paradigm shift for me, government to get into private sector. But now it's like also like distraction could be like, hey, just like change after a year, right? At least give some time in a company. Then second is change the technology. I mean, get to understand. I mean, you don't want to work on something which is likely outdated or it is not very, cutting edge, but at the same time, you'll not always have cutting edge work in your kitty. So you may want to still, because the fundamentals are by and large very same, despite like what you want to. So if you stay on fundamentals, stay focused, don't jump around too much, have ability to actually interact and learn from others, be ready to share others and work in a team, is something which is very important for an engineer to start thinking outside of their box, right? And because you are absolutely not going to solve the problem all alone by yourself, right? And that is the transition of you, even as an architect or as a distinct engineer, senior engineers, because then you are tending to talk to other people and then finding out. Now, absolutely, with now you have co-pilots, you have pair programmers with AI agents, etc. Though you have other teammates now who's actually you are, but then that is virtual. I think still you can't beat a person-to-person interactions, exchanging idea, doing whiteboarding. That is what I felt for me was, I think, distinct. I never shied away from reaching out to anybody in the organization, despite how high they were, and I never shied away from reaching out to somebody who was out from college. That, hey, should I be asking somebody who's just joined versus something like, but they had great ideas, they knew about it because they were more relevant. Sometimes I felt because I have spent something in my area and I don't know about. So always like I was first one to call for a huddle, get into a conference room, do whiteboarding, try to hash out this thing and toss things across with different people. And as an outcome of that, what came out was, I think, great friendships were developed at the end of the day. Egos were dropped, and at a team level, we could figure out something which alone I would have definitely not been able to.
Great. Was there an instance where you got a harsh reply from someone saying, "Why did you even come to me?" types?
There are some people who are very inward; they don't want to actually interact. Correct?
Right.
They're great people, right? They have a lot of knowledge with them, and they have their ways of, their ways of working. So many times I did got pushback that why did you like, for example, I think it's like sometimes it's really not intentional. It's just that they're very happy in what they're doing, and they perhaps want you to do a lot of prep work, because I came across a lot of senior people whom I would go and talk to them, and they would expect me to be well prepared before I talk to them. Correct? Right. I'm asking some questions, then I have read through, and I'm asking some very pointed things, because those were the people also who were very busy. So they had lots on their plate, correct? So you go and ask them, and you ask them, and then you again go and ask them. So you got to be, I learned that from that was like they were expecting me to actually come more prepared and do my work and then ask those pointed questions. But even then, sometimes it could happen that some people were just like not willing to talk to. But there are, in that case, Tony, I mean, if you're hitting a wall, then you're hitting a wall, right? And then you want to move on to somebody else, right? And not basically keep banging on the same wall. But at the same time, the reality is, if you are well prepared, you have done your homework, you are asking somebody senior for some advice or something, and wherein that person thinks, well, he or she is asking you questions back and you're able to answer, then the conversation takes different thing. I've had fantastic architects even later, and now they're working for me, who absolutely don't want people to just walk to them, right, and ask for solutions unless until they have gone deeper. Some people have more tolerance, they're ready to work with you. Some people have lesser tolerance, they want to only work with you provided you are not taking too much of time away from them. I think so that has always, it happens even now in executive leadership, and I'm talking to some of my peers and seniors, etc. But I think that's how I see it. It should not be taken as a setback. You should take that as a learning. And in case you are still not getting a response, maybe you should move on and try something else. Yeah, try somebody else.
Right. Like, What are those characteristics that you saw in them that inspired you the most?
Yeah, I think one is like, one person who comes to my mind, and I always idolized him, was Abdul Kalam. When I was in DRDO, for example, I happened to, I had privilege of meeting him. He was actually Director General of that time. What an inspiring person, what a committed guy to talk to and listen to him. And he was obviously the guy who was heading the entire organization, but a different person, like a person who was, I think, very differently made. Let me tell you that, right? Very few people would be that level of commitment you would see from, and in corporate sector too, you come across people who are committed to cause, and the cause could be growing the business. Absolutely corporates, and they want to basically be profitable. They want to bring in revenue, and I'm absolutely fine with it. That's what mission is. Few things which I have been practicing, which I have worked, I would say, and I continue to do that, is one is like level of commitment. When you commit to something, correct? Let's say it could be even you have to write a document. Now today I spend a lot of time creating presentations, for example, communicating to organization, communicating to to my board, for example, communicating to my executive leadership. So the commitment part is, but at all stages in the career, it is very different level of commitment. It could be basically you have to finish a piece of work, and that could be even, writing tests, for example, automating tests, for example, right? Writing code, for example, writing design documents, for example, finishing the sprints on time, as a Scrum Master, for example, or finishing the release on the time as a release manager. So there are there are tasks, and which are basically, these are sort of work items which each of us sign up for. It could be even assuring that I'm going to respond to that mail, for example, today, right? And telling that this has come, and your boss asks you that, hey, this is waiting on the queue, will you get back on that? And you say, yeah, absolutely. So the commitment for doing what you commit to has to be extremely of high standard, is how I always believe. That once you commit to, let's say I'll do it today, nothing should stop you, even not yourself, correct? It doesn't matter whether it is midnight or whether it is evening, whatever it is. You should feel very restless. I always even feel today restless when I say something that I'm going to do and I have not done that, correct? And I ensure that happens, come what may, right? Whatever I have said. Invariably, it's not that I have not failed, I have failed. But if I have not been able to do, I've also been very responsible to say that I'm not going to do it, and informing that person that, look, to my manager, that, it looks like it's not happening today. I'll do it on Monday, for example, right? But I've always kept informed them, taking anybody by surprise. So one is that commitment is like, it's very simple word to say, right? But to practice, it's difficult. Once you start practicing, like what you say, you do, and you really do at the time what you suggest, correct? So that's one, which I've seen in most of the leaders. They're extremely committed. You take any example, right? They're committed to what they say, and they do what they say. Second thing is quality. I have always felt for young engineers, for senior leaders as well, the quality of work product, quality of our output is extremely important, especially in an Indian IT sector. I have seen, working with multinational companies, working with Indian companies, the quality of anything what you produce, right? Whether it's your code, whether it's your tests, whether it's your scripts, whether it's your product, whether it is the presentation, whether you're asking for investment from a VC, right? Your business plans, your quality of thing what you produce has to be supreme. You should really take pride in what comes out of it, correct? People should really find it hard to break. And maybe that was also because I was a test engineer as well during my career. And I always embrace quality to my heart, that there is nothing which should come out of your desk which actually should be, flaky, and people should find faults, etc. I mean, I used to come across very well written design, approaches, documents. You won't believe, our specifications written, beautifully written, and those would have spelling mistakes, right? So I would like, come on, now at least in today's world, you don't even care about it because it's auto, right? It gets corrected automatically.
True.
But it's funny that, the first put down is like, is this really seriousness by the guy, right? And I'm reviewing a resume for an individual, and there are like grammatical mistakes. Not grammar is still okay, but let's say spelling mistakes, and that puts me off. Like, is this really serious? Can't you run even a spell check? And it's beautifully written, right? A lot of content. So that reflects on a little bit qualities. That's second aspect. Third thing is what you do with high integrity, right? Which means what you are doing right when nobody's watching you was always, I felt, is a very important value for me personally. And it's very hard for me to do things which, which I feel is not right, correct? And despite whether I've been told that, correct? So it's like, if that comes within, right? That's the important, why that value is important is because, like, you are not cheating, for example, when, it's like you're doing the right thing, despite anybody looking at your back, right? You know that you would do this if you are copying some content from, let's say you're taking stuff from internet, and now absolutely with AI tools, the whole internet is up for you, right? But you're acknowledging, right? Even somebody's work you are taking, right? In your, for example, when you're producing the work you're taking, you're acknowledging that, right? You're making sure that somebody's work does not get unnoticed, right? These are the things which I felt like always recognizing people, like if they're ideas you have taken that, hey, I discussed this with Tony and then together we came up with something like this. I'm just presenting because we talked about it, instead of like claiming credits on that, write yourself. So this is like goes with honesty also, that doing the rightful things despite being told to do it. Correct. So that's the integrity part, right? Again, very simple word. So commitment, quality, integrity. These three things, and there are others. Like collaboration goes automatically. When you become leader, communication, you're communicating more than what you're doing.
Definitely.
Because you feel that, oh, people have got it, people have understood it, but the reality is they've not got it because nobody has told them to do it. It's all in your head. So communication, that goes without saying. But these three things have always stood out for me, and also what I've seen leaders practicing, Tony. Yeah.
Great. So, but do you code these days? Like, is there a time that you spend on coding anytime?
No, I don't.
Right.
I don't. Frankly, and I'll tell you, it's not that I cannot. Correct. I think it comes back to, what is more important for you, right? And if suppose somebody finds that is more important, they're able to find time for it. That's what I think, right? But for me, I think that other things which I feel like setting up, leading the large organization and focusing on setting the right structure, making enablement of my leaders to be able to lead, etc. That I think is also likely my interest, right? Leadership and management continues to be my interest. So anything on that aspect, automatically I get drawn, correct? At the same time, people get drawn to doing, coding and development. I love doing architectures. I love doing design, brainstorming on building systems, scalable systems. But I think there are people who I think even have been more experienced and very capable people who are in leadership. They want to do it. I think it's personal choice. Tony, is what I feel, and you automatically, your interest tend to draw you, and there's nothing wrong and right about it, right? Is what I think, right? I absolutely like to strategize. I absolutely like to do designs. I absolutely like to sit with my architecture. I want to plan. I want to make sure my organization is set up for scale. I want to drive new initiatives with the team. I want to empower my leaders so that they can grow. That is where my time gets spent. But there are people who absolutely like to spend time in actually, raising PRs, for example, today, right? Even who are very, very senior at the same time. Right. It comes back to, I think, what you get drawn into and what you like to do. Yeah.
When you manage like 30 to 40 people, things are very different. But when you end up leading a whole lot of engineers, what changes?
I think the scale, right? One is the managing at scale. And, interestingly, like how software evolves, right? When the software gets into real massive enterprise use cases or working with in the consumer space, having, millions of users likely hitting, right? At the same time, so how does it scale, right? So because it's a very solid structure backing that, correct? Right. It is a scalable architecture, which basically scales. And then because the Software itself is well written and there is infrastructure which supports it. Very similar if I look at, as a software engineer, that when the software scales, people also scale in very similar fashion. What I mean is, like, if you have good architecture of organization architecture which you have put under, and you have to invest in that as a leader to build a solid organizational architecture, you have to have very smart people leading those, basically, those groups, right? Or areas of expertise, right? Which very much like software architecture, right? What is basically your core, part of those components which are running and which are very well built, are of extremely good quality. So very similar, very high quality, high caliber people whom you should be hiring and who should be leading that cohort of people, right? And then within them, their leadership, right? Within them, they should be investing in building their leadership under them also, who can actually, who have potential to grow, but who have perhaps who have more deeper level expertise into specific areas of concern, correct, within the organization. So why I'm giving this analogy of architecture is because, like, you look at how the various components of an architecture, scalable architecture, are built with good quality thinking and good practices. Very much similar thing goes for organization. So this you have to invest in the architecture for building that organization, and within that, for me, for example, my leaders are absolutely some of the smartest people I've worked with, even in Oracle, and then last in Metrotech and with IBS. Currently, the very smart people who have passion, are very passionate on what they're doing, and within them, you have to actually coach them and make sure that they have right set of people who are leading. My architects and my senior architects who are actually part of my organization, they are very, very committed, very hands-on people who have done fantastic work in their career, and they have very smart people as part of their organization as well. So I think that that one is very important. So then you are now operating at a very different level.
True.
But at the same time, I feel that as a leader, you should not be sitting in an ivory tower, as they call it, and then you don't know what's happening. Right. So today, therefore, the connects are very important. How you're talking to people in the wider, forum. I think as a person who's, like me, who's engineer by heart and leader by profession, but at the same time, I get very pleased when I'm interacting with people, freshers who are joining out of college, right? For example, so you are ready to talk to them in their language, right? On what basically excites them. You are ready to talk to architects, and you are able to talk to engineering leaders or the problems they face. And then you start taking inputs from various other functions like finance, for example. I spend time to manage my budgets very carefully and make sure that we stay on track, working with HR, for example, so that the people aspirations and the people development aspects are well thought through. Yeah. So I think you have to scale, the organization, and then you tend to make sure that structure is there to support, and then you have to make changes, because nothing remains like in case of sometimes the organization do scale down, so you should be able to scale it down, correct? Similar like software, right? It gets, when the load is not there, likely it gets scaled down. Today, the dynamicity in organization is also so much in modern AI way of doing things that organizations are becoming elastic. So then you should be able to scale down. So I think that's how I see it, Tony. There is no reason. I didn't lead such large organization. This is the largest organization I am leading in my career. It's a learning for yourself. Yeah. But I think the model can be replicated very well.
Interesting. What is your take on vibe coding in the first place, and how do you see the adoption of vibe coding in these large organizations?
I think we have tried, and we have been trying, correct, vibe coding. My feedback is mixed. Okay. Right. It really is something when you are trying to put together a proof of concept, trying to bring in something which could be a demoable piece, and you want to show it to customer, show it to internal stakeholders, try to build opinion around it, get mind share built, etc. We have been successful in doing that. when we have started to do it at scale, correct? With having hundreds of engineers, for example, or 50 engineers, for example, trying to build a large enterprise system, then we have to build it in much more methodical way, because people do it. People would use this in very different, thought processes at time and different ways of doing it. So when stuff starts getting merged and stuff starts coming together, that's where we start seeing challenges, because these are large set of teams. These are big complex systems to be built. Correct. So finally, when the code is actually moving from developers' desks to, let's say, pipelines, and getting through the runs of automation before actually the reviews and goes into the production, you start to see a lot of rework actually at that point in time happening.
Right.
Correct. And then that time that rework is actually now mostly people have been moving on so quickly that the rework, when it comes to, then that slows them down in great velocity. So I think therefore I would say it's mixed, but fantastic to build initial prototypes, trying to do and this thing. But for production, enterprise software build out, I think a more methodical approach, including using of coding agents, using of AI tooling, doing right prompting, accepting suggestions, and finally taking it to the production. Finally, with you being the pilot, is still very, very important.
Right.
And so my take is like, use whatever tools, right? Absolutely, the tools are evolving so fast that if you're using Cloud Code, but then finally you are the one who's approving it and making sure that what goes out fine, because what matters is like tomorrow a bug comes, then you are going to fix it. Correct. I think that time Cloud, and I'm just saying, right, we have seen a lot of these tools, they struggle. Correct. What would finally be the merge code? So whether it's Cursor or Copilot, like this would struggle fixing a production defect. So at that time, what happens, especially because in our industry, because once you ship something and then it stays for quite long time, right, etc. So that's my take. The fundamentals doesn't change. Therefore, you being a good software engineer doesn't change, but your problem landscape is shifting, because now you are operating, you're a more orchestrator, you're a builder than actually trying to code the boilerplate code, right? But at the same time, you are the approver. So which means that your name is still stamped on anything which is coming from the code. Right. So if you're doing through vibe coding, you be very careful that you have to thought through the problem also very, very clearly, right? Then actually jumping into the solution space.
Even when internet came into existence, there was this take saying a lot of people will lose their jobs and all that. And the same is happening now. How do you look at this, and what is your take on this?
So yeah, I've been through these waves quite a bit in terms of like even how the programming languages evolved, right? Client server systems came in earlier, the databases, like you'll go to the databases, two-tier application, Oracle would decide, you use PLSQL, and then you basically code on that, and that was your app, correct? And companies were actually still, a lot of those systems are built using that. Mainframes are obviously there, they're still there. The COBOL programmers are great demand today, by the way, because we are actually moving systems from COBOL to modern systems, and nobody knows how to basically manage those, correct? So at the same time, that is true. And, you go to even some of the big banks, airlines, likely their systems are still running mainframes, because that gave that kind of reliability, and they cannot change. I think there are multiple waves. One is like obviously .com, right? Everybody just wanted to create a .com, site, and they wanted to move to internet. And that came with the advent of internet. Bandwidth started becoming cheap, and it became accessible, as it was very difficult. We used to have one, connection at our office, and that's what it is. There was no internet outside in cafeterias or anywhere, and you could only send mails from office. And that was a big thing, right? When internet. But that was the backbone. I think the move to .com, that time, everybody just wanted to get into right that way. Move to cloud was big thing. We felt, data centers are going to die. Everybody's moving their systems from on-premise to cloud. That happened. That shift happens. Then to an extent where somebody said, oh, well, you know what? We want to still run data centers ourselves because we don't trust the cloud companies, right? We cannot afford the outages. And why should we give power to few companies, right, in their hand? And reality is only there are 3-4 companies actually who are making shots, calling shots in the cloud space. I think AI, although is very different, I feel.
True.
This wave is very different. I would say it is most disruptive than what we have seen. Correct? And what I have seen. Why it is most disruptive? Because it is changing our thinking quite a bit. Frankly, in software engineering, developers really rule the world, right? And I've been developer, I love that. And I'm very, very, I would say, humbled by the fact that developers always call the shots, right? Developers are the one who build actually AI tooling today, correct? Engineers, when I say developers, I mean engineers, right? They build. So now they're automating their jobs themselves in some way, correct? Because they felt that, you know what, this is something which now we have been doing, and frankly, if anybody will come strongly against it, which are people who are rejecting this also, are also the engineers, smart engineers. They feel that, no, it doesn't cut it. Especially for me to build some large systems and maintain it, it doesn't cut it, correct? It helps with building greenfield projects, but it struggles with brownfield projects, for example. Right. It struggles with, defect fixing, for example. And the agentic or the AI systems are in enterprise systems are solving the real business problems. In pockets, it is still happening. But at the same time, when we see this really making a difference for the customers' business problems and helping them cut costs and be more efficient, that is still being experimented in large pockets. Right. There are clearly evidences of this is showing. But then AI is why it is game changer at this point in time, because it has really inverted our thinking, correct? Right. I would say less than the jobs are getting automated. It is more about now you're starting to think at a very different level. As a builder, now you're starting to think, I should be thinking more of a problem space than actually thinking about solution that how I'm going to build nuts and bolts, because a lot of things, and that thinking in some way, Tony, has been happening with a lot of frameworks which are abstracting your thinking anyway, right? You are no more coding at a level, you are no more developing at a level close to operating system. Your abstractions were going high, correct? Whether all the frameworks which were coming, right, which you were which were abstracting your thinking to a level that you are talking about, you're thinking problem space. But AI has taken it even further, that it doesn't even want you to think about frameworks, what you are going to use, because it likely are going to use those frameworks and build something for you quickly. Right. I think this is disruptive, undoubtedly. We should take it in stride, use this as our companion. We should absolutely not, think that, I can live without it because this is for real. Correct? Right. This is one point. It should make us productive. Will this take away job? Will people lose jobs, etc.? See, I think any of these automations, right, which has come over years, correct? And compare this with, industrial automation, for example, right? The advent of industrialization. New jobs would obviously gets created, right? You are able to be more productive as an individual. Would this mean that, some of this, absolutely, even for that matter, computers came, calculators came, right? Obviously, new jobs started coming. Broad spectrum and landscape, but in our industry, I see this is really a game changer and something which would be disruptive, and we should be extremely adaptable and be ready to adapt to the changes which are taking and experiment with it and go with it, right? Not at all provide any hindrance and resistance to the fact that, oh, this is not my cup of tea, somebody else is going to do. Because in this, if you don't do it, right, then likely your obsolescence is very, very high, correct, as an individual. At anything, whether you're a finance professional, whether you're an analyst, whether you're an HR professional, whether you're an engineer. But with engineers, as I said, because they're not automated this thing, like product development, right, software development. But does it solve all of it? Absolutely not, right? You still have to think of problems, how you can. So that's what this is one of the biggest change, I would say, in recent times, right. And in couple of decades, I would say, since the advent of cloud, I would say, right? But at the same time, would it be concentrated with very few companies? Looks like that is what it is turning out to be, that there are very few companies who are likely doing, innovating in this space and likely even controlling that space. And that is the one thing which one has to be very careful of, correct? That how they are building systems which are, for example, not tied to a vendor, right? Coming to that extent, right? Yeah, so those things remain even otherwise also, right? You don't want to get tied to a cloud. You don't want to get tied to a model. You don't want to get tied to an infrastructure. Open source is other thing which is absolutely has changed how we build software, right? And then the licensed software, which used to be the case, and I've had great run with open source, building software using open source. We built a whole bunch of our systems using open source, and all the libraries, etc. Even in case of AI, which are open source, is the way to look at it. That's how I think for it to make difference for large enterprise systems, I think the potential is clearly there, and we are starting to see the value of it. Um, how much one how much one actually start realizing as a business user, perhaps that's something which has to be quantified here.
Great. So, what is your one piece of advice on a final note for an entrepreneur like me and someone who's right now making a great pace in this AI era? What is that one piece of advice that you think will change things altogether?
Tony, first of all, hard for me to give you advice because I have not been an entrepreneur, right? Being actually a professional, working. So I have a lot of respect for entrepreneurs because you guys are taking huge risks. You guys are putting a lot of stake, and you are absolutely have to stay ahead of curve to continue to be, to be creating the differentiating products, etc. Right? So, therefore, it's really. I feel that I'm nobody to advise an entrepreneur, but at the same time, if at all, only some words of experience is something which I think are very relevant, right? To be true, which is true in business and also in entrepreneurship. One is I'm sure you would have seen that it's very important in this time that today because of technology allows us to fail early, right? Experiment and fail early, right? So I think that was likely was not there earlier, that we could not fail early.
Right.
And when you asked me this question, what you would have done if you would these were available, we would have failed early, right? Instead of failing after a year of development and figuring out, oh my god, this is not something which is getting used, right? So one is like the thing is like fail early, right? And I think my only thing is investing in people, hiring best people, and making sure your team is very strong, correct, is important. If it continues to be important. And AI tooling, for example, is great, but finally you are the pilot. So anything which you approve is the one which is going in production, right? And you vouch for it. And yeah, I think the fourth bit is like, I feel the quality is anybody who's using your product should not be uh, finding flaws, right, at the end of the day, right? Even during the demos and things like that, right? So or even at the POC level, it has to be rock solid. Therefore, is what is still, and which is what a little bit I'm concerned about the code which gets generated out of these tools, right, etc. Because it's just pulling in from learnings and public repos and etc. And then people are not paying enough attention, and it goes, and then it has vulnerabilities reported, prompt injection attacks getting reported, and those kind of nasty things. And then you realize, oh my god, what happened? Correct? It's using a library which is already outdated. So I think those fundamentals are important. But as an entrepreneur, I'm sure that you're taking great risk. All the very best to you, and I'm sure that you will emerge a successful company. Yeah.
So, thank you so much, sir, in the first place for taking time out amidst your super busy schedule. I mean, like we have been waiting for 6 months for this. So, thank you so much in the first place. And for anyone watching this, guys, this is starting from your personal values to principles to becoming a pro in your career to eventually becoming a leader and how to sail the trends in tech. That's like a lot of value in one podcast. So thank you so much, sir. Thanks for coming on the session.